Hello, thank you for joining me for this study on the context of biblical history this week, considering the Maccabean revolt and the Hasmonean dynasty. As you'll recall, Antiochus Epiphanes, who was the ruler of the Syrian Empire, the Seleucid ruler who was a successor of the empire as it was broken up after the days of Alexander the Great, Antiochus Epiphanes especially pursued a ruthless agenda, as all the Seleucids did to some degree, of Hellenization. In particular, he hated the Jews because they would not assimilate. In 168 BC, he committed one of the greatest atrocities by offering a sow on the altar in the temple in Jerusalem, using this unclean animal as an affront to the Jews. Through this period of time, just a short time after this atrocity, the Syrians tried to force an old priest by the name of Mattathias to offer a pagan sacrifice. Mattathias refused, and another Jew volunteered to offer the sacrifice. Mattathias killed the Jew and the Syrian officer. In doing this, he became a national hero. Mattathias was of the family of Hasmon, and thus came the name Hasmoneans. The family of Mattathias was joined by other zealots and carried on guerrilla warfare with the Syrians with a great deal of success. After the death of Mattathias, leadership fell to Judas, his son. Judas was called the Maccabee, the hammer. And from his name, the Maccabean term came into being. The followers of Judas made their way to Jerusalem in 165 BC. They entered the temple. They removed the evidence of pagan worship. They observed an 8-day feast of dedication. We know it also as Hanukkah, or Festival of Lights. The feast began on the 25th of Kislev, which is roughly our month of December, exactly 3 years to the day after the desecration by Antiochus of the temple. This feast became an annual feast among the Jews. In John 10:22 and 23, we read of Jesus being in Jerusalem at the time of the feast. At that time, the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. Of course, it was winter. It was what we would think of as December. The Feast of Dedication had already become just really a generation or two after the fact, a national holiday. Judas died in battle with the Syrians in 161 BC. Jonathan, his brother, took a place of leadership. He was killed by a Syrian general. And then Simon, another brother, was the leader. The Jews gained immunity under Simon from taxes imposed by the Syrians, and the Jews proclaimed their independence. Now, this independence was not recognized by the Syrians, but they were in many ways independent and considered themselves to have gained their independence. Simon became the high priest, and from that time on, the high priesthood was hereditary among the Hasmoneans. This would become very important even into New Testament times. Simon was murdered, and his son, John Hyrcanus, became high priest. He reached an accord with Syria, and he advanced a form of Hellenism. In other words, maintaining some of the outward trappings of Judaism. Pagan images were not brought into the temple or anything of that nature, but he did promote Hellenistic ideals and therefore fit in with the Syrian agenda. The Hasidim, the pious ones, were perpetuated in the party of the Pharisees. And this is the beginning of the rift between the Pharisees, who were the pious ones, the ones who wanted to observe the law, and the Hasmonean party, the Sadducees, who advanced the idea of Hellenism. Independence was gained in 129 BC, and it was confirmed by the Roman Senate, and it's important that Rome is increasingly being the arbiter, much in the same way that in our day, whenever the Arab states make peace with Israel, it is under the auspices of the President of the United States. In that time, whenever two parties in the Mediterranean world wanted to seal a deal, they did so with the knowledge and approval of Rome. Under the Hasmoneans, the high priesthood became increasingly worldly and irreligious. This again is something that we will see in the New Testament. Aristobulus, the son of John Hyrcanus, took to himself the title of king. So both being the king and the high priest, we find that this continued, and there was a continued rift between the Pharisees and the Hasmoneans. Civil war erupted after Jannaeus was officiating in the temple. He was the Hasmonean king, high priest, and he poured out a water libation at his feet rather than upon the altar. The Pharisees asked the king of Syria to join them in a fight against Jannaeus. After the war, Jannaeus gave a banquet for the Sadducees and had 800 Pharisees crucified in the presence of the guest. Alexandra, the wife of Alexander Jannaeus, was appointed queen by her husband, and as his queen, as his regent, she came to the throne upon his death. She had her son, Hyrcanus II, appointed as high priest. Hyrcanus favored the Pharisees. However, his brother, Aristobulus, wanted to be king. The Sadducees supported him. Aristobulus II defeated Hyrcanus and forced him to give up his office. However, the Hasmonean dynasty would come to an end. In 63 BC, Pompey, the Roman general, conquered Jerusalem and turned it into a Roman province. Aristobulus was carried captive to Rome. Hyrcanus was confirmed in the high priesthood, and he was appointed ethnarch, a term that just means ruler of the people, appointed ethnarch of Judea. He was not a king, but he was the chief officer of a client state of Rome that was actually, in an administrative way, overseen out of Syria. This is an important framework for us to understand the setting into which Jesus would be born. The Romans having taken over Palestine, and the Jews divided between the Hasim, the pious ones, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees, those who wanted Hellenization, those who resisted, and all of whom who lived under the control of Rome. We'll be picking up next week with the discussion of the Roman Empire. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you have a great week.